How do you teach somebody to accept critique?
You have to make them understand that critique is not, it's not always destructive. And really, critique is telling you how to grow. When you burn your hand in a fire, you know not to touch it again. And it's not because you're dumb or you're arrogant. It's because you didn't know. And to, an adult burning their hand will feel silly for doing so. But ignorance doesn't have an age limit. You cannot know something for a long time, but really the answer to that is understanding that you didn't know and now you do, or understanding that you might have had a weakness, but this is your chance to grow on that and to make it your strength. So it's really about turning something around from you're doing this wrong and making that a bad thing to I see something that you don't as a critic, and you can take this and grow from it and use it to your advantage. Use it to expand your abilities, expand your skills, and be stronger. Come out of it stronger because you know it now, and maybe you see it too.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hey bosses, I am so happy to announce that the winner of the 1-year anniversary Author Like a Boss goodie bag is Dylan Crush. Dylan left an amazing review on iTunes and I appreciate it so much. Shout out to Dylan. Hey girl. I also wanted to thank some of the other people that participated by leaving reviews, including Kiana Hornbuckle, Rosalind Griffith, and Bethany Forrester, amongst many more. Thank you all so much for participating. If you also love the podcast and would like to support it, you can do so by leaving a review, subscribing, or checking out the Patreon page at authorlikeaboss.com/Patreon. Thank you. Hey everybody, hey bosses. We are here today with the lovely and generous and patient Cayce Berryman. Cayce Berryman is the senior editor for Kingsman Editing Services and the founder of Author's Tale. She started Author's Tale in 2014, hoping to learn from other writers, but the community grew and became a space for writers to learn from each other, to perfect their craft and develop their own voice. So Author's Tale is a Facebook group and more?
It is. It is a lot more than a group. It's become a huge community. I mean, a small community, but a community with a lot of huge hearts. Really, we've kind of collected some dedicated members who really bring out the group's meaning, the purpose of the group. They show people what it means to be an author, which isn't just to improve your craft, but to help others and show others what it means to have a craft and to have creativity to show people. You want your readers to see something great, and one step above that would be just to share that with people who are trying to do the same thing. Wow.
That sounds amazing. And it's Authors Tale, you guys, because it's clever like that.
It is. And it's plural possessive because that changed at some point.
It's not just one author. It's multiple authors. Oh, so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey? Tell us about how you came from wherever you were as a young folk to now being an editor and founding Author's Tale.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, not really kind of interesting, but, filler words.
Super interesting.
Sure, let's go with that. No, I, like a lot of people, I started writing young. I started writing poetry and things when I was 12 and never thought a whole lot about it. I thought it was just something people did because they felt like doing it. And when I went to college, I wrote less, but then I moved away from home and I kind of discovered a loneliness that I had never felt or known. So writing became my friend again. It became something I used to express myself. And I ended up writing a novel or starting one anyway. So after some time, I decided this is going to be a lot longer than I thought, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I tried to look it up, and one of the first things I did was go on Facebook to try to find a writing group. I was part of a couple random groups at the time, so I knew what groups were for. But for some unknown reason, nothing showed up in my search. And so I decided to create one, kind of thinking maybe someone will join it so I can bombard them with questions. And while I was waiting for someone to bite, I ended up Googling my own answers and looking things up and watching videos and taking free courses, and then going to college where I started journalism. And that was because that was the only writerly thing available at that college. And so I didn't know what I was getting into. But very quickly, I started to realize how much I loved writing, and I learned so much. And then Author's Tale started to grow, and I had stuff to offer. I would critique anything anyone wanted to give me, and I would ask them to do the same. And I made a lot of really good friends that way. And then I got all these recommendations for writing groups that were there long before mine. So they were hiding until I already had a group. That was great. But I was still learning, and I became more and more obsessed with it. And so much so that I started to offer advice and critique and help more than I was able to ask. I started to realize I was having more to offer, and I loved it. I loved knowing stuff and being able to help other people with their writing. So on the journalism side, I had done more with the newspaper. I was a photojournalist, and I was pretty good at it. And I was taking on anything I could handle and loving every minute of it. But I wanted to do more with the newspaper. So they ended up allowing me to proof the pages after they were designed, because I had no idea how to do that at the time, how to design. And I was sort of familiar with AP style, so I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. Well, I bloodied up those pages with a red pen, and it was a very good feeling. And they wanted me to do it again. and again, it was something that I didn't know I knew, if that makes sense. And so that became another direction for me. I learned more about editing, learned more about Chicago manual style and the publishing side of editing and acquisitions editing and all these things. And then I decided I wanted to go to the University of Chicago and take classes there to get an editing certificate. And I got my bachelor's in creative writing and English. So it just kind of all built one thing on top of the other, this obsession that I had. But all the while, Author's Tale was growing, and people were wanting a lot more. And they were asking for writing prompts, and they were asking for games, and they were asking eventually for an anthology. They wanted to put their work somewhere, because we did have weekly writing prompts, and they wanted to be able to showcase that. So at the time, I had no interest, because you publish an anthology, that means you make money from it. And because marketing isn't my strength, and it's something I'm still slowly learning, one, you have to market that stuff, but two, you get money from it, and where does that go? I had no illusion that this was going to be a get-rich-quick thing. I didn't think anything, in terms of money. So I didn't want to say, yes, let's publish it, and I'm going to pay all of you, in half pennies.
Yes.
So I kind of came up with this new thought, and why not dedicate the anthology's profits to something bigger than us? That way, all the money, a small chunk of money can do a lot more than smaller chunks of that small chunk of money. So we ended up dedicating our first anthology to literacy for incarcerated teens, and from there it became what it is. And enough that since we do spend, and by we, I mean the other administrators and I, we do spend our own money on Author's Tale. So we did dedicate what is our third anthology to Author's Tale. But we do hope to dedicate future anthologies to other organizations and, learn more about the marketing side. But we do want to keep the focus on authors improving their writing and working together, because one thing we do in each of these anthologies, or with each of these anthologies, is we provide a free workshop. We have a small fee to enter, but the workshop is free. It's a month-long journey for these authors, and they work together. They critique each other's work. Each week, I give them a topic, and it's detailed, questions they can ask themselves about what they're reading, so that they can offer constructive advice and critique and feedback, and they can just build off of what they're learning and help others to improve their story in time for the judging phase of the anthology.
Okay, so what? That is so brilliant. So I'm curious about this anthology thing. I want to know more about the timeline of the anthology. So people, there's a judging phase, there's this workshop phase, there's I'm assuming some kind of application phase. So can you walk us through the process of your anthologies?
Definitely. So, of course, it starts with announcing everything, saying this is coming. We have a theme. The first 3 anthologies, we had a theme, and we required all the authors to use the writing prompts as inspiration, because originally that's why we started the anthology in the first place, is because of all these writing prompts. But first of all, it became very difficult because you have 2 things to pay attention to: the writing prompt and trying to make the writing prompt relate to the anthology's theme. So now we're, removing that requirement, since it is becoming, we're still trying to keep the focus on improving and things like that. It almost, not that it's a silly rule, but it's an unnecessary one. So, of course, it starts with announcing the actual thing. And we try to give authors as much time as we possibly can. We did announce this year's a little bit late, in March, halfway through March, I think, is when we announced this one. And we've changed the rules a little bit. So submissions close June 15th of this year for anyone who wants to participate in the workshop. And that's because the workshop will start in July. And that's 1 month. So it gives them a little bit of time. That's, I guess, 3 months, about 3 months for them for the workshop part, or for those who want to participate in the workshop. And then anyone who doesn't want to participate, as well as, those who do participate in the workshop, after the workshop's done, they get to revise their story. So the final and official deadline, workshop or not, is September 1st.
Okay.
And after that, everything goes into the judging phase. And that takes 1 or 2 months. Again, we're kind of revising how we did things just to see what works, what doesn't, or if something may work better. So it'll take 1 or 2 months. Then we'll announce the winners. And from there, everything goes into the editing phase and formatting. And we are hoping that doing everything earlier will give us more time, because all of this is volunteer. We don't get paid to do this. So this is, whatever we can do in our free time. And we always have 2 editors and 1 guest editor. We try to. So far, it's worked out, but we'll see. So just so we can get a couple names on the front, because we, say who edited the book instead of all 20 authors, or how many authors we have, however authors we have. We put those on the back of the book cover, and then whoever edited it on the front. So, we try to give people something, if no one's getting anything financially out of it. And exposure is one of those things that people say run away from. But again, that's not what we're about. We're trying to get writers to be comfortable and to improve and to be part of something bigger, which in this case is, giving their skills and their talents to something that will benefit another organization, and they get to improve in the process.
Yeah, that's what I really, really like about. I've never heard of anybody doing it like the way you do it. And it's not like I've heard tons of people doing it, but I really like how you've made it this educational process with the benefit of you're in an anthology, at the end. I think that's really beautiful. What kind of things are you finding that are the most helpful in the workshop? What are the things that writers need the most help with? Typically, or generally, or just like, what are some things that have come up?
Accepting critique is by far the biggest thing. And, it's kind of accepted. We go into it knowing there are going to be some broken hearts and hurt feelings. But giving critique and accepting critique are very difficult, especially for newer writers, because you go into something wanting to be great and you want to achieve something. And especially but even when you go into something like a workshop, when you know you're going to be working on what you're working on, you don't expect to have to put as much work into it as you end up having to put into it. I mean, you don't think that you're going to need to redo your whole story or anything. You want to put not minimal effort, but you think you have a masterpiece and you don't expect to have to put or change so much or revise so much. And I guess another thing would be figuring out what critique to accept and apply, because what someone says might be great, but it might not be what your story needs. And so those three things I would say are things that we tend to have to focus on when we're going into the workshop, hoping that writers come out of it stronger, really, and better writers as well.
How do you teach somebody to accept critique?
You have to make them understand that critique is not, it's not always destructive. And really, critique is telling you how to grow. When you burn your hand in a fire, not to touch it again. And it's not because you're dumb or you're arrogant. It's because you didn't know. And to, an adult burning their hand will feel silly for doing so. But ignorance doesn't have an age limit. You cannot know something for a long time, but really the answer to that is understanding that you didn't know and now you do, or understanding that you might have had a weakness, but this is your chance to grow on that and to make it your strength. So it's really about turning something around from you're doing this wrong and making that a bad thing to I see something that you don't as a critic, and you can take this and grow from it and use it to your advantage. Use it to expand your abilities, expand your skills, and be stronger. Come out of it stronger because you know it now, and maybe you see it too.
I love that so much. Because I sent one of my books to an editor, and about halfway through getting it back, I realized that she kept on taking out when I said really in my book. I'd be like, really, 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 really. And I'm like, oh, I say really a lot. And it's not necessary. You can just say it.
Yeah. And it's simple things like that. And little words that we might even fall in love with, like, when you want to be redundant because you feel like it puts necessary emphasis. But then you realize, and that's another thing too, is some of the stuff that you do, that is brought to your attention, you realize, oh, I don't need this because I did this well the first time. I did a good job of, showing how she felt. I didn't need to tell the reader how she felt. You also see that your strengths and in feedback and critique. You see kind of things that you do well, and you can work on that and enhance that and do better with that, instead of using those little weak points that might make your writing more difficult to read or not as engaging.
I like that. Because most everybody thinks about critique and they just think about the bad part. They don't think about the good part. And I love how you're saying you can use those the things that maybe are your weakness to be your strength. Do you have any not transformation stories that you can share of somebody who came into before the workshop with this challenge, and then by the end, maybe they submitted to the first anthology, then it's the second one where they're like, oh, they fixed this thing. It looks so good now.
Well, we do have one author who I honestly don't remember whether it was this third anthology or the second one, Heart of a Child. But she came into the workshop with a story that she wasn't a huge fan of. She was trying to achieve something. She wasn't quite sure whether she had done it well or done it at all. And so she was a little discouraged coming into it because she didn't feel like she put her best foot forward, but she was trying to. And at the end of it, and if she ends up listening to this, she's going to know I'm talking about her, so I don't want to say her name.
It's fine.
But she came out of the workshop deciding it was one of her favorite stories. She loved it. She loved what she had wanted from it, because at the end of it, she kind of understood what people were missing, what they had wanted. And, she realized that's what she was trying to do. It's kind of like that word you can't find, but it's something that defines what you're feeling or thinking. And then someone comes up with the word and it's like, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. And it was kind of like that for her. All the things people were saying, they were pretty ruthless because, of course, she knew going into it that she had a lot of work to do. But coming out of it and being able to revise it, she was really proud of what it came out to be.
Wow. I'm so curious. So just to clarify, so the people that are wanting to submit to your anthology, they can submit it's like a pre-application. They're like, I'm going to submit. And if they do that by June 15th, then anybody gets to participate in this workshop.
Yes. So in the form, we ask that if you submit, you are a member of Author's Tale. And there are multiple reasons for it. One reason is because it's free to be a member. So why not?
Yes.
And another reason for it is because when we do try to contact these people, because it is a workshop, it is something that they're dedicating time to. So we do have to get in touch with them individually and make sure they're going to be part of it, because we create a schedule. It's a very complex, time-consuming process to put everyone into groups and telling them, these are the things you're going to read. You have a week to do this. This is the topic you're focusing on. And, we have to make sure the people who sign up for this are actually going to do it. So one thing being a member does is it helps us to find them, first of all. Mm-hmm. Easier if they're not easily contacted via email. We can find them through Facebook. Through Facebook. And then it also allows us to create a conversation out of it. When you have the community talking about the anthology, people get more excited about it. So we like people to say, I'm almost done with my story, but I need a couple eyes on it. Or I'm so ready to submit. Who else is submitting? What are you working on? We love those conversations, and being a member, you get to be part of that. You get to be part of the community, and that's what we want people to share.
Wow. I'm just going to say this, Cayce. I really think that the way, your entire story is just a testament to curiosity and trying new things, and from I think I'll just write some poems as a little kid to I kind of like this. I'm going to do some more. I'm going to, I can't find a Facebook group. I'll make my own, and not in a way of trying to crush it and doing things, getting things done in a way that I'm going to start it just feels really natural and beautiful. And I really appreciate how people can see that you're just I'm just doing this. And this seemed like the most natural thing to do next. And so we did it. Because a lot of people, especially women, when they come into this space and, look at Cayce's not that, she's like, don't compliment me. I don't know what to say. But
Happy birthday.
Yeah. A lot of people come into this space, especially women, and they're looking around and it feels unnatural. Especially because there's a lot of introverts. There's a lot of people who this is very scary for them. Writing is a very vulnerable thing because you're putting out your creativity into the world. And a lot of the advice that you get is challenging sometimes because you do have to put that out into the world. And I'm really appreciating your story where you're just yeah, and I just did it. And I'm sure there was some scary times. Were there any like times that were a bit scary or challenging?
I mean, yes, many, and on both sides of it, really, because when I first started writing my novel, it was, of course, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about dialogue or character development. Don't even know that I knew those words as being relevant, because you're writing. What else do? You write, and whatever comes out is a thing that you did, and good for you. That's a lot of words. And, that's where I started, was I'm at 30,000 words. I think that's a book, isn't it? And no, it's not, but it was scary, because at some point you do have to share that. And being someone who went into this not thinking, I'm going to make this a career, or I'm going to do something with my life that has something to do with writing. I mean, at this point, I had no clue what I was going to do. I was in between majors. I mean, I jumped into journalism just because it had something to do with writing. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted. And it, at the time, happened to be writing, and I was going to see where it went. And it took me places, kind of, but I did have to share that, and people did have to critique it. So I had to learn. And I do know that I am someone who prefers to learn, not for myself, but that's how it ends up going most of the time. I end up looking things up and counseling myself. And thankfully, when all this started, I had a writing friend. She was one of my first members, actually, and we became alpha readers for each other. We were both new, and we learned through our friendship, what it meant to critique and things like that. And so when it was time to share my work with other people, and they got to tear it apart, the challenge there was that it was a little bit more harsh. And I had to be okay with that. And because I was the admin, I wasn't allowed to be mean. And I guess I try not to be mean anyway, but I was the person who created the group. I had people who were in there, and so I didn't want them to leave. So I didn't want to get angry at them or cry.
You weren't allowed to be petty, like, well, it doesn't matter what you say.
Exactly. So I had to learn how to accept it. And I think that helped me, because I'm a very sensitive person. It's easy to hurt my feelings. And I learned a lot by not being able to lash out, whether passive aggressively or not. And I learned how to accept critique. And that really helped me in journalism too, because you're going in there, you're going to receive critique whether you want it or not, because they don't want to put something in the paper that isn't publication ready. So I had to learn on both sides, kind of in the professional world, working for the college newspaper, and then, in my recreational world, working with a book that I didn't know what I was going to do with. And it was just, it was interesting, and it required a lot of learning on my part. And then, the first thing I did publish was in the college newspaper. So that was a terrifying experience of its own, knowing that my name is under something. And the whole time I couldn't help but think about the typos that might be there that I didn't catch, or how I said something and whose feelings I might hurt. And, what if I put in a quote that was taken out of context and I just didn't see it, and things like that. And it was,
it's scary. It's so scary. The first time you put it out, it's so like, oh my gosh. But I do think, this is me being so woo-woo, I just find it very curious. This is what I'm just pointing out, out of curiosity and interest, that the number one thing that people, like when I ask the biggest challenge for people coming to your workshop is accepting critique. And that was your your biggest challenge that you've said. The first thing you said when I asked what the biggest challenge was for you was accepting critique. And I just, like, very big picture wise, feel like that that you're in a space that you're supposed to be in, because oftentimes I think that the thing that's the biggest challenge for us that we then overcome is what we're most easily able to offer and teach other people to overcome. What do you think?
That was very well worded. I wish I could, put pretty words. No, no, it's true though. I mean, when people struggle, they're often able to help people a lot more with that same thing because it's one of those I've been there moments, and so you can relate, and you can often see that struggle within other people before maybe they can, or it's just kind of like when someone falls in the same spot, you say, I know how you felt because there's a pothole there or whatever. And so it's easy to see because you had the signs, you had the symptoms, and then you become eager to help because you know the answer or know some of the answers. And I like that.
I like it. I really like it because the other thing that it does for me, and this is maybe more helpful than me just being like, look at that, you guys, is while you're going through whatever it is that's challenging you, knowing that if you can overcome it, that might be the biggest gift that you can offer people.
Yeah. And it kind of gives you strength in knowing that when you are struggling with something, just because if you can find that place, if you can succeed in this, then the next step is to find someone who is struggling too. And just knowing that you can be an encouragement in any form should be an encouragement in itself.
Yes. Very beautifully said.
I said a pretty thing.
Pretty words there, Cayce. So can we talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about the mindset challenge for the people that are coming to your workshops or just in your group or just people that writers that you've worked with. But can we talk a little bit about just the actual writing challenges, some things that you see that are common that maybe as an editor, you can help with some of our listeners with?
Okay. I'm going to have to try to figure out where I want to be nice and where I don't.
You don't have to be specific to any person. You can just say some things that I notice that come up regularly are just generally nobody specific. It could be yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are definitely a lot of challenges going into writing, especially when you have a group of new writers, a lot of writers who haven't been published before or are new to the experience in general. I mean, like I said, a lot of them are coming in not familiar with critique. So you also know that they're not terribly familiar with growth. They're still learning. They're still relatively new. And so some of the, or I guess I'll go with challenges. Some of the challenges I see in writers have a lot to do with the structure of their stories. Because one thing that makes short stories different from novels is of course, length. But there's a lot more to that. I mean, I tell authors a novel is a lifetime, a short story is a moment. And one of the struggles that authors have coming into this is they try to put a novel inside a short story. And and it brings about a huge challenge, which kind of helps me to direct what topic writers are focusing on, with their critiques each week. But a lot of writers come in with very, short stories, maybe 4,000 words or so, maybe even 1,000 words, but they have maybe a 100,000 year collection of things happening in it, or they have someone's entire life story, which in some cases can be done. It's just difficult. And it's a huge challenge for someone who's new to short story writing. And so that's one of the bigger challenges for sure.
I think that's, and you're specifically coming up from short stories. I'll tell you, and I said it on the previous interview, but I just finished, actually, it just came out recently, you guys, but my first piece of fiction is in an anthology that I just published with a friend of mine. She was editing and I submitted. But my biggest challenge after my first draft was my question was, is this a story? Like, I was like, is this a story, or is this just a sequence of events happening over the course of a day? But I can see, because that's what I was like, it has to be a story. It can't just be this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think that's a challenge, but no matter what the length necessarily. Like, I think that can be a challenge for new writers, regardless of the length. But I can see a big challenge in, like, it might be, you're like, this is actually an outline for a much larger story. It's not a short story.
And often that ends up being about how I word it. This is a great outline for something that would be a wonderful novel. Write the novel. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing too, is it's easy to be insulted by that, but at the same time, you have enough content for a bigger work, a larger work. And so, that's me telling you, you'll do a lot better turning this into something bigger, because that's what it deserves. It's kind of like when someone, I'll tell some of my authors that they're giving one of their secondary or tertiary characters too much of a spotlight, and they think, well, I want their story to be told. Great. Give them a novel. Mm-hmm. And it's similar to that too, in, relation to novels.
Yeah. I would recommend anybody who's listening who maybe has found that this is a challenge for them, I would recommend listening to a couple of different other interviews that I've done. One was with Richard Fox, who has made an amazing career out of writing a story and then starting series off of the side characters.
It's a good idea.
Each side character gets their own series. And the other thing that I recommend about his interview is that he talks about his outlining processes. And he has some outlines that he's like, some outlines are like 20 pages because they're so detailed that by the time it gets to the writing the book, it's, and if you're writing a short story, maybe it is just an outline for a much larger book, but it's really detailed. It's going to make it way easy to write that larger book because you already know exactly what's going to happen. And the other interview that I recommend is Jessica Brody. Have you heard of Save the Cat Writes a Novel?
I think I have. I haven't read it.
Save the Cat is a screenwriting thing, but she took that screenwriting thing and made it for writing a novel. And I really, really like her book. And she goes through the beats that are necessary in a story. And it's like 15 beats. She's like, this is how you can do it. She's like, every story should have them, including short stories. And so I read her book after I did my anthology, my short story anthology for the anthology. And as soon as I get my rights back to that story, I'm going to make just a couple of changes to make
that works
a full, like, I'm like, oh, it's still good, but I'm like, oh, I can see how I can follow these beats, how they make sense. And if I put like a sentence here that references this, or a paragraph here that references this other beat, it will make it that much stronger, even though the story itself is less than 10,000 words.
That's awesome though.
Yeah. It's really awesome. I recommend it to you and to anybody because I really liked it. So Jessica Brody, you guys, she was amazing. Off of my own soapbox and going back to Cayce.
But we like your soapbox.
I know. I like it too. That's why I made a podcast.
That's what it is.
It's so true. Oh my gosh, it's so true. Okay, so tell us a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about? Let's see. I'm trying to see where I want to go next. No, now that I'm off my soapbox and I have to think about somebody else. How do you fit all? Okay, I have a question for you. So you're doing this all voluntarily. You have a job. You have a life, presumably. How do you make all of this work into your life? Like, how does that work? What does it look like?
It looks like a mess. I mean, I guess if you're thinking about time management, it looks like a lot of early mornings. My full-time job doesn't start until the afternoon most of the time, and it goes into the evening. So that tends to be, my second life, the life that I have to live. And then my first job is writing and editing. And so I try to do a lot of that in the morning. And for a while, that involved waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I was visiting family recently, and that destroyed my time clock. So I'm working on getting back to that. But it does. It involves, waking up earlier so that I can do what I know I have to do and also do what I want to do, before work. And sometimes that does get a little emotional when time is, when there's not enough of time and I have a lot to get done, which that has started to be routine around the time that we publish the anthology. There's a pattern there. But
when do you publish your anthology?
We were trying to do it in March of every year, but all three of the editors, me being one of them, had time crunch issues with our own personal schedules. Again, I was visiting family and things ended up being, none of our schedules were meshing well. So we were about a month late this time, but we tried to hit it at about March or April is, okay. I guess we're going to stick with.
Yeah. Okay. So that gives you, I like it that you have plenty of time. One thing I noticed when we're working on this anthology was like, oh, we need to allow more time because there's something unique about anthologies, you guys, which is there's a lot of stories and you want them to all be a certain level of quality and not everybody's at the same level of writing.
Right.
But I still care about the people and they all deserve to have their stories told. And so allowing time, I'm there with you, Cayce.
Exactly.
I'm learning from you. I'm like, oh yeah, she's figured this out a little bit. You should allow a lot of time just because it's a voluntary thing. Like we aren't paying ourselves to do the parts that we're doing. Even just organizing a book cover takes more time than you think.
And that's volunteer service too. I know a few people trying to introduce themselves to the designing world, but I know the work they can do. And so they're always some of the first people I reach out to. But I'll always try to design a cover, and someone else I know will always try to design a cover just so we know we for sure will have options. Mm-hmm. But people always pull through. We always have a few designers and a couple of new ones. And that's part of the fun too. You're a member, you get to vote. And so there's a whole process of voting on the cover. And it's amazing because you're bringing in another branch of the publishing world. You're bringing in cover designers who are willing to put forth a little bit of time to be part of something else. And it's hard to find that. I mean, and not because, no one has a heart. It's hard to put aside free time and do something without getting paid. It's difficult because people are trying to make a living, and I totally get it. And so it's really great when we can find several willing cover designers who want to give it a shot, who want to be creative, because we allow them their own creativity. This is what the title is, have fun. And there are no rules.
Wow. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about these anthologies. I'm very curious, what are the names of some of these anthologies, Cayce?
Well, our first anthology is Once Upon a Wednesday, and that was actually, I don't know my years. I guess that was 2016, and 2017, 18 was Heart of a Child. And I mentioned for Once Upon a Wednesday, the profits that come from that go to literacy for incarcerated teens. Mm-hmm. And for Heart of a Child, the profits go to Children of the Nations. And then we have this third anthology, Ink Dreams, which we're putting back toward Author's Tale. And another reason for that is so that we can start purchasing our own ISBN numbers
Yes.
and things like that, and maybe looking for other small marketing things.
Well, you can run ads.
You can.
You can run ads where you can't if you don't have any money.
Exactly. Yeah. So last year I ran a couple ads, but I'm not made of money. So, things like that, it is costly to do that. And it's not just in running ads, but it's in figuring out where those ads need to be run.
There's testing process with ads. It's not,
exactly.
Yeah, it takes money.
It does.
There's some parts of it, no matter how much you can DIY it, and you can DIY a lot, and it sounds like you're doing that. But at some point, if you want it to be in front of more people, you got to put in money
where they are. Yeah, you got to
where they're at. I know it doesn't always have to be a lot of money, but if you want to hit all avenues of finding people, then money, ads.
Yep.
But the ads, you guys, once you figure out how it works, they pay back. It's just the initial part. There's a challenge.
Exactly.
And if you want to know more about Facebook ads, go listen to my interview. It's a 2-part interview with Bobby Kim. I think it's 39 and 40 or 40 or 41. It's around there. And then if you want to learn about Amazon ads, go listen to my interview with J.R. Castle. And she's way early. I think she's like 13 or something. She was lovely. She and her husband are the Chip and Joanna of indie publishing.
That is a wonderful title to have.
Yes, they are so adorable. Oh my gosh. And they're really good people. Just like Cayce.
Aww.
Cayce, this has been so much fun. Okay, can you give us, the final question is, can you give us your best advice for writers who are looking to self-publish and be successful?
Well, I will give you the advice that we've kind of made our motto or our mantra for Author's Tale, and that is write and surprise others, but keep learning and surprise yourself. And that just, basically means, you can use your gift to make other people smile or laugh or cry or be scared. But once you start learning, you start to realize that writer inside you who's trying to come out and how amazing you can really be. And so we try to encourage everyone to do that. And those are my words of advice.
Oh my gosh. I love that so much. This has been very fun for me, Cayce.
And it's been fun for me too.
Yeah. Can you, where's the best place for people to find you? Or multiple places, maybe?
Okay. Well, yes, there are definitely multiple places. Mm-hmm. You can, of course, find me in Author's Tale, and that group is on Facebook. We have a website and a Twitter, but we are all chilling on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And of course, I am also with Kingsman Editing Services. So I have a website and a Twitter for that. But I also have a Facebook page where I have weekly live videos and I talk about little editing things and writing stuff and all that fun. And I have to show people my face. And
yes. Me too.
Yeah. But most of the time I'll either be in Author's Tale or on Kingsman Editing's Facebook page. So
awesome. I love this so much. So I think you're probably going to find a lot of people reaching out to you and being like, I want to be in an anthology. Are you opening soon for another anthology? What's the theme of your next one?
Yes. So our 4th anthology, submissions are open. It's called Magic We've Forgotten. And yeah, so there might be a lot more fantasy in this one. We're hoping to see a lot more literary. We like to see people dig into, the personal sides of themselves, which people tend to do with short stories, and that's great. Mm-hmm. So submissions for that are open. If you join the Author's Tale Facebook group, we have 2 pinned posts. One of them has our rules, and the other one has the link to submit to the anthology. So if you go there, you can learn more. There's another link to the Author's Tale website where, all the rules, how do I submit? Mm-hmm. What happens to my rights, which we don't take your rights. We just temporarily have them until it's published, and then you get them back.
Yeah. Awesome.
So any questions you have, there's a whole FAQ. And then if, your question's not on there, then admins are very good at responding to messages.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Cayce.
And thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for being here, Cayce. Thank you everybody for listening. So glad you're here. Hugs and happy authoring here at Author Like a Boss. Hey boss, you made it to the end of the episode. You're the best. Because of that, I'm going to give you a special invitation to find out more about the Author Boss Academy, where I and a bunch of really awesome authors hang out, have fun, and get stuff done. If you end up joining, tell me the secret word and you'll get a special bonus. Find out more about the Academy at authorlikeaboss.com/academy. The secret word is nipples. Hugs and happy authoring. I hope to see you soon.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.